All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Thank you for coming out to the museum this afternoon and for joining us for today's quite special panel. First off, happy Pride, everybody. The governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, actually declared June to be Pride Month for the state of North Carolina back on June 4th. And so here at the Museum of Natural Sciences, we're proud to be able to put on a special panel about LGBTQ plus issues in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM fields, right? Because unfortunately the world is not as equal a place as I hope that many of us want it to be. And so by hearing stories, getting narrative, and getting shared lived experience, we hope to be able to advance equality and make anyone and everyone feel welcome and accepted in STEM fields. Scientists are supposed to have open minds, right, and examine the world. And so that's what we want to do here at the Museum of Natural Sciences as well. And in recent years, the museum has re-upped its core values, so to speak, to include diversity and inclusion, and to make sure that here in this space, as the largest museum in North Carolina and as one of the largest natural history museums in the country, that we are also doing our very best to be welcoming and accepting of anyone who wants to come and participate in what we do here at the museum. So, thank you to all of you for being here in the Daily Planet Theater. My name is Chris, and I'm curator for the Daily Planet Theater here at the museum. And a few weeks ago, I was hanging out on Twitter, as maybe many of you do as well, and I saw that a new organization had started at the California Academy of Science, so out in San Francisco, a group called 500 Queer Scientists. And this initiative is a campaign to put names and faces and stories online, and people could self-submit their information. So if you wanted to put your information online and be a name and a face within this community for science, you could do that. And then this database would exist for journalists or people who have theaters and museums who want to do panel discussions on these issues to search through and actually be able to invite people to participate and increase the diversity of, say, speakers or the diversity of voices that we have in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So I got in touch with one of the founders of 500 Queer Scientists. Her name is Lauren Esposito. She's an entomology curator at the California Academy, actually. And my original vision for a program was to have her Skype in, and we would chat about this new initiative that she had started. That seemed like a cool program. But of course, in talking, getting on the phone with Lauren, she said, you know what would be a better idea? What if we use some of these 500 people who have signed up and you actually get their stories? And we can figure out who's local to you and then invite them to be a part of what you want to do at the museum. So that was obviously a much better idea, right? And so today, we've been able to put together an exciting panel of local students and professionals in STEM from right here in the Triangle. Starting on my right is Nick Geithner. He's a postdoctoral researcher at Duke University. Then Liza Kulko, who's a PhD at UNC Chapel Hill, PhD candidate. Anthony Monroe is at Duke University, an MBA/PhD candidate. And then Caroline Lightshoe is at North Carolina State University as a PhD candidate as well. So the way that today's program will work is that I've asked the four of them to take a few minutes each and share their stories with all of us. And then I have just a couple of questions, and with the time that we'll have remaining, I hope to be able to get your questions. So I'll come out with a microphone. If you're watching and participating from the second floor of the Daily Planet, Madison, she's waving, we'll have a microphone and we'll be able to facilitate your questions as well. If you're up on the third floor, I want you to participate too. You'll just have to come find us on the second or third floors because we ran out of microphones. That's how that goes. So without further ado, please give our panelists a welcoming round of applause, and I'll ask Nick to share his story first.
Hi, I'm Nick, and I guess I should start by saying I've known that I needed to be a scientist considerably longer than I'd known I was gay. I can remember as early as elementary school being just so excited about knowing how things work. One of the earliest instances of that being reading Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time way earlier than I should have, and just taking a book and a pencil and dropping them at the same time, and they hit the ground at the same time, and that was awesome. And so I knew at that point that I needed to be a scientist. Went to undergraduate school in Central Ohio at a tiny little liberal arts college. As a liberal arts college, it's very open and accepting, and really it helped me in that sense sort of come to terms with myself, but that was such a long, sort of a slow process for me that I struggled a good deal in college. And coming to grips with my identity, the GPA slips, science sort of takes a back seat, and unfortunately, after undergrad then, I needed to reprove myself. I was new and confident in this identity that I'd found, and went on to a terminal master's program in Southern Ohio, dramatically more conservative place than just something 2 hours away in Central Ohio. In that area was the first place I knew of personally my peers, other gay students being beaten coming out of a bar, and things like this that I didn't really know was even a possibility anymore growing up in the Midwest. But that's where I maybe refound myself as a scientist, and continued on my trek south to South Carolina to pursue my PhD at Clemson University, and places where of higher learning, where you're at a university and you're pursuing science or anything else at this high level. It's supposed to be this place of inclusiveness and open thought and really progressive. It's not always the case. And I was in physics specifically. My degrees all the way through were in physics. And for one reason or another, it's known stereotypically as an especially conservative science. It's dominated by men, particularly straight men. And so it's a place of a lot of isolation, really. And so I struggled a good deal there as well. And so diving into science maybe was sort of a savior for me in that sense. It was 3 months, I think, before earning my PhD that I met the man who's now my husband, also a gay scientist. So that makes for great dinner conversation. And now I'm up here at Duke. And the path that science has taken me really has followed, I think, the track that I've taken in finding my identity. And that while struggling through undergrad, I also really, really thought, I'm going to do astrophysics, and I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. I did some of that, and then I went on to my master's, and oh, well, they have no room in that program, but I guess I'll do, this nanotechnology thing. I'll just go do some of that. And then I finished my master's in that. I was like, all right, PhD, I'm going to go back to my roots, I found myself, and I'm going to go back to astrophysics. Well, that's still full, and there's no money. So stuck in nanotechnology, and that's really what brought me to Duke, because I'm a postdoc now, working at the Center for the Environmental Implications of Nanotechnology. And in that, what I look at is the real effect that nanomaterials, this emerging technology and emerging form of matter that we're really starting to understand and get a grasp on its applications, what does it do when it's out in the environment, intentionally or otherwise? And the real goal being to understand at this very fundamental physical level how we can do that to solve the environmental problems facing us, whether it be water purification, nano-enabled agriculture to feed more and more people. But the journey along the way, and where I've ended up now with what I hope is going to end up being a cool career, we'll see, is one that felt very lonely for a time. And certainly finding my husband helped that a good deal. And knowing that there are plenty of other LGBT people in science helps a lot. But having an advisor or someone who's even open to having that discussion. I never came out to my master's advisor. I came out to my PhD advisor only because I really wanted a letter of recommendation for a diversity grant, and he looked at me and said, "Nick, do you know what diversity means?" Well, okay, and yada, yada, yada. But it puts that extra barrier sort of in front of what you want to do. And I sincerely hope that having a bit more visibility, having a bit more presence of some established LGBT scientists, that those just getting going can really say, you know what, yeah, I can do that. I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter how I identify. Do whatever you want.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liza, and I'm afraid of microphones. So I'm a grad student at UNC. My story is a little bit different because I grew up in Russia, as you can tell from my accent, potentially. I grew up in Russia, and Russia is incredibly homophobic, but I had one love since the 8th grade, and it was chemistry. I had an amazing teacher in 8th grade. She encouraged me to study chemistry, to participate in chemistry competitions. She never doubted that I can go to university and do chemistry and become a professor if I wanted to. And at the end of 11th grade, when I had to graduate from high school in Russia, I had to decide whether to go into the best Russian university, Moscow State University, and study chemistry there, or to come here because my parents were immigrating to the United States. Part of me really wanted to come here to do science. Obviously, scientific opportunities here are incredible. I felt like I can, find better scientific and research freedoms and like job opportunities and things like that. And then a part of me thought that there was a small chance that I may be queer. Little did I know. So I immigrate here, and then I don't speak any English whatsoever. So I had to go to a community college to learn English. And I kept having, I had this dream of, I really wanted to become a professor in chemistry. And so it was really hard to learn English, and I did it. And then I transferred to Columbia University because I was like, well, where else can I go and get a good chemistry degree? And at Columbia, I graduated with my degree in chemistry. I did research in medicinal chemistry, so I did, straight organic synthesis for a couple of years, and then I moved into chemical biology. And I was really fascinated by biology, so my interest kind of changed to the biology, from like hardcore chemist as I was. And then when I was applying to grad school, I was looking into more biological programs. So I ended up joining UNC, and I'm right now in pharmacology department at UNC. My research right now, I'm a structural biologist. I look at how proteins interact with each other, basically. I'm looking specifically at the mechanisms of how HIV hijacks the cell cycle of the mammalian cells. And as a queer person, I find a special meaning and significance in it, because I'm a queer individual and because I'm a queer scientist. And I found a community at UNC, we're called the STEM Pride of the Triangle. So it's a club for LGBTQ and LGBTQ identifying people and allies who want to create an interconnected community in science. And I found that, and I joined this club, and I'm a representative of this club for two reasons. First of all, I felt like we need to improve visibility here at UNC and at North Carolina in general. Coming from New York City, where basically everybody is gay, like that was not a big problem for me. And then I came to North Carolina, and I felt like I need to do something. And the second reason was that I feel like that being myself and embracing my own identity at my workplace in the lab, at the bench, surrounded by my lab coworkers, it makes me feel empowered, and it makes me feel a better scientist, and it makes me be the best of like who I can be in science. Sometimes it's hard. Embracing your identity in front of other people is hard. It was really hard for me because in the past year, after I came to grad school, I had to do rotations in 3 different labs. So basically every 9 weeks, I had to go to a new lab and come out to a new bunch of people. And it was really scary because, I mean, this is like North Carolina, and it's kind of way more south than New York City. Yeah, but I think it's really important. For me, it was really important to be who I am at my workplace. And from here, we were told that we should give advice. So I have 2 pieces of advice. First is find somebody who can encourage you ambitious and support you for who you are. And the second thing is embrace your identity and be who you are, and try to surround yourself with people who can support that.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Ooh, okay. I'm Anthony, and I am an MBA PhD, and you did not mishear that. I'm getting both my MBA and PhD. And if you want to learn more about that, I would be more than happy to talk to you. My PhD is actually in immunology, and so immunology is basically just the study of the immune system, which is a comprehensive, collaborative effort with a lot of different types of cells that helps protect you against foreign microbes. It helps in recognition of self versus non-self, and actually maintains homeostasis in your body in general for many different types of systems. And in particular, I'm actually interested also in HIV, particularly the humoral or antibody response with different vaccine regimens, and looking at both a correlate of protection and the mechanism for which these antibodies actually protect during vaccination. So my lab is part of the Duke Human Vaccine Institute, and our goal is to have a HIV vaccine hopefully soon. So and as a queer person, a gay person in science, being able to study a disease that's kind of been tearing our community apart for decades is pretty humbling, and it makes me feel kind of noble for me loving science enough and being able to contribute to this problem. And my mentor, Dr. Georgia Tamara, she's amazing. It's part of the reason I joined her lab was because she supported me wholeheartedly, which is sometimes rare to find in a PhD professor. So my piece of advice would be find somebody who will support you both in your academic endeavors as well as your extracurricular endeavors as well. And so I grew up in Miami, and I'm actually part Cuban, part Peruvian, and part Japanese, so a pretty eclectic mix. And growing up in Miami, it was a very conservative environment. But I was a kind of a hyper-rational child. In fact, my mom once showed me a box of all my pro-con lists I would ever make as a child. So any problem I ever came across, whether it was school or personal, my mom said I had a notebook, and I would just write a pro-con list for everything. And in fact, I was an avid reader as well. So basically, when I was 11, I read a Jane Austen novel, and there's a particular character that was ambiguously not identified sexuality-wise. Basically, the implication was he was gay. And when I read it, I was like, I feel such a connection with this character. And that weekend, I went through my encyclopedias, looked up what homosexual meant, and I made a pro-con list because I realized I think I am. And I made 7 of them with different topics. And my end result was, as the rational child I was, I would accept being gay, I just wouldn't tell anyone. And that persisted for a long time. And I grew up in a church environment as well, so I was really active in church. And I always felt misplaced, and I couldn't really understand why until I realized I was gay. But even then, I had to kind of hide. So when I was looking for colleges, I immediately was like, I want to go somewhere far, and I want to go somewhere that was really animal science related. So I chose Cornell. and it was the best decision ever. Love Cornell. It's in upstate New York. It is really cold, and yes, maybe there is slightly like a big controversy with suicide, but it's not really true. But at Cornell, I really learned a lot about myself, and I learned to really embrace my voice. I used to be very, I know you can't imagine right now, but I used to be very quiet and very subdued. But I learned more about myself there, but I also had my first experience with science, working in a virology lab with Dr. James Casey, and he studied turtle fibropapillomavirus, which causes tumors on sea turtles, which I thought was just the coolest thing ever. And at the end of that, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, realized quickly that's not what I wanted to do. And so I was kind of lost, didn't know exactly what I wanted to pursue. So I actually did something called a post-baccalaureate research education program through the NIH. They are amazing programs for underrepresented minorities to get a feeling of what it's like to be a researcher and encourage you to do a PhD or MD PhD. And I went to Mount Sinai in New York City, and Dr. Tara Krulich, who was the director at the time, she's incredible. I wholeheartedly admire her. She's actually a pioneer for women in science in general. She was actually the first dean of the graduate school for any higher institution learning. So that was pretty incredible. I admired her a lot. And while in New York City, I deviated from science, actually, and I went into this realm of writing. I was an intern for Vogue, for the online magazine, and then from there, I stemmed into a writing career for a television show. And so it was a big leap, big departure. But I'm glad I did it because it helped me appreciate that I actually should be in science. I did it for a year and a half. It was hard, and it wasn't as glamorous as I thought it would be. And so eventually I came back to science, working for a biotech company, and I really liked that actually, so I came back to academics. And now I'm a MBA PhD student with the hopes of opening my own biotech company after I finish graduating. But two pieces of advice that I would give you. I already gave you one, which is find a mentor or find somebody who believes in you more than you believe in yourself. It's so crucial. Like, there are times, like, even though I'm a happy-go-lucky, pretty positive person, I have like my low moments, and having someone there to like keep pushing and encouraging you is so important. My second piece of advice is don't be afraid to take the path less traveled, meaning I had a super circuitous route to getting back to science. I had many jobs, and I appreciate that now, though. Like, I see so many people who are in my cohort who are 21, 22. They're just straight out of college, and now they have to struggle with being a PhD student and finding themselves. Luckily, I had time to find myself, and now I'm focusing on being a PhD student. Not saying you can't do that, of course, but like, I find it great to know who I am and trying to pursue that PhD. Thanks.
Thank you, Anthony. Carol?
All right, I'm Carolyn, and I feel intimidated because I feel like all of these people have been very active with LGBTQ activities throughout their career, and I have not been, which is not to say I haven't been out, but like everyone else was talking about, I knew I wanted to be a scientist when I was really, really little. I think I was 3 or 4. I didn't know what the word biology was. I probably didn't know what a scientist really was, but I knew I wanted to work with animals, and I didn't want to be a veterinarian, and I was very adamant about that. And I had a family who we were nature lovers, went outside all the time, so that part was actually fairly easy for me. I had a lot of great mentors in that sense, both personally and through school. And I think I was 10 actually when I realized I was queer. I was on the bus going home from school, and somebody was talking about gay people, and I thought to myself, that's what I am. And then I realized that that was a bad thing, and so I just didn't think about it for another 6 or 7 years. And so I was out by the time I entered college, but at that point I had still really kept my queer identity separate from the rest of my life. It still kind of seemed like a bad thing. So all my friends knew. I think my professors probably knew. I was probably out to them. I also went to a small liberal arts college, so wasn't a huge deal there, but it just didn't really seem to be related to me. So I did social things that were queer, and my science was my science, and that's what it was. And as I was finishing up my undergrad and getting ready to go into grad school, with a degree in biology, I knew I wanted to go into animal behavior, still pretty firm on that. I was really interested in reproductive behavior at the time, and part of that was when a lot of I don't know if you know about this, but a lot of biological research had come out talking about like the gay gene and that kind of thing. It was right around that. And I was interested in a lot of that research and possibly going into it. And so I was writing my graduate school applications and I was talking about how I was interested in this, and I was interested in it because I was queer. And I was told to take it out over and over again. People were telling me that no, nobody cares about that. That's going to count against you. They just want to know about the science. They don't want to know about you. And so I took it out. And I'm all about efficiency, and it seemed more efficient to just not include it if that would make my path easier, and so I took it out. And so when I agreed to be on this panel, when Chris contacted me, I agreed on it, and a few hours later I was talking to my partner, and I was telling her that I felt like I had imposter syndrome, that I couldn't be on this panel. And she was like, well, you're queer, and you're a scientist, so therefore you're welcome on this panel. And so I started thinking about like what that really meant to me, and I realized that this is the first time I've really talked about this in any sort of cohesive way. I don't talk about this. And that was actually kind of made me feel better about being on this panel, because if I don't talk about it, there's others that are certainly not talking about it, and that's probably not okay. Which is not to say that my experience has been awful. I've had a lot of social oppression, certainly, but within science, I've had a lot of supportive mentors, mostly on the science side, but my advisor, I'm out to my lab and my colleagues and that kind of thing. Everyone's really supportive. And now I study mouse behavior, so I'm still doing animal behavior. I compare stress behavior between wild and lab mice, so I got away from the reproduction a little bit. And I also do a lot of interdisciplinary work, which includes a lot of public science communication, which I guess technically we are doing now. I'm not usually the center of attention when I do that. I'm usually helping others do it. But a big part of science communication is trust in that conversation and authenticity, and if I can't be out, then I can't be authentic. And I think about others coming up after me in a world that is technically more open, but if we look at what's happening politically and socially right now, that might be changing. And it's a really, really scary time, I think, even for those of us who are adults, who have support, who have established our identities. And I just want to make sure that other people don't end up like I did and just think that it's not important.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing all of your stories. So I want to do, first things, I want to do another shout out for the 500 Queer Scientists Initiative, visibility campaign for LGBTQ plus people in STEM. So yeah, round of applause for them, because Lauren at California, I owe her much thanks for helping do this. She might be watching online too, so I hope if she is, comment, Lauren, say hi, and we'll catch up later. But what inspired the four of you, and we'll start here and we can just move down the line, to actually give your name, face, and bio, your story, to this initiative, and say, yes, I want to stand for these issues, and I want to be a positive force and an impact for other people like me.
I would say really just because I knew that I didn't have anyone to look to, or to be a role model, or someone to guide me, or even just to exist, and I could just be in the background, look at them and say, well, they made it, it's fine. And looking at younger people coming up in science and being able to potentially be that person. I know that in physics in particular, they did a survey recently and found that across all age groups, there are maybe 4% of physicists in the United States willing to identify as LGBT, which seems low. But when you ask those people between 18 and 25, the number is 16%. And so there's a huge empty headspace above 25-year-olds. Sort of nowhere to look to, it seems.
Yeah, so I'm a part of the STEM Pride of the Triangle, so visibility was already part of what I think about and do every day, basically. But I actually thought that when I was like submitting my picture and my story and whatever, I thought there was going to be like editing process, and they're going to edit me out. They're going to be like, oh, this is a grad student from UNC, we don't really need her. Yeah, and I was really surprised when I found my picture there.
So I did it because same reason that Nick did it, but also I'm working with Biogen right now, and I'm trying to create a cohesive atmosphere within biotech and pharmaceutical companies in general, and hopefully we'll have a symposium soon for that topic in general. But I figured this would be a great networking opportunity to reach out to other people who maybe are interested in my diversity and inclusive kind of project for LGBTQ individuals.
So I also wanted to be a role model, although that word feels different because in my head I'm still 18 years old and just out of high school and don't know what I'm doing. But I didn't have one. In undergrad, both of my advisors were people of color, and while they weren't queer, that was important to me because they had a visibility and adversity in a different way, and that was helpful for me in figuring out some of the things I wanted to do. But I didn't, like other people were mentioning, I didn't really have a lot of queer role models. There were some people, professors who were queer, but they were out, but they weren't really. I was in a small town, kind of semi-rural in Wisconsin, and so while the college was liberal, the city was not. And so, you know, people kind of talked around it. You knew, but you didn't really talk about it. And I kind of would like to be a part of changing that narrative.
So, coming up in science, and I think all four of you mentioned that the passion for science kicked in really early, and then I guess like any of us, as we age, we discover who we are and learn more about ourselves. But what sort of things were you able to rely on or find support in as you were discovering these identities that maybe other folks could be on the lookout for, or maybe a better question is, where can other folks look for support, either where you found it or where you think there should be support? And whoever would like to go first.
Where I found it personally was before I had really even understood my identity, I joined a fraternity. Not a stereotypically gay-friendly place, but mine certainly was, and they were my rock, really going through that. So what I would say, I guess, is a group of friends or people that you can trust in or out of science is really, really important. If you do have faculty as you're going through your education, there's a spreading, more and more universities, you'll see a safe zone sticker or something like that. Even just seeing something like that, I think makes a huge, huge difference. The only out professor that I knew in my undergrad was in the music department. But it automatically made that building just feel like a safer, more inclusive space, just knowing that that person existed. Yeah, so I guess that's what I'd say.
Like I said, I was a reader, so it doesn't sound really cheesy, but books were kind of a huge support for me. I found the world of literature had so many different examples of different types of people and different sexualities. So when I was younger, it was definitely books. Then when I went to college, Cornell had this huge LGBTQ community, and I just went and like made friends, and the friends became like my solid foundation, as well as my research mentor, James Casey. Although he was a hetero cis male, he still was super supportive of anything like that I did. So like, they may be hard to find, but if you can find someone like a mentor that like will be there for you, it's definitely how I got through it.
So I mentioned at the beginning, and this idea that science itself as a discipline is open to the world. So the people who practice science should be looking out at the world with an open mind and open eyes. Right? As scientists, we pose questions, we collect data, and then we see what comes of the data, and we use that to help us understand how the world is, how the universe works. But it seems that historically, and your stories I think maybe bear this out, that representation hasn't always been there. And we know from looking at ethnic minority communities all the way through to these issues as well that representation matters. Seeing people like you or knowing people like you in these spaces matters. Moving forward, is science and are scientists perhaps better equipped to pursue equality in their fields because of training to examine the world as it is and not prescribing the way we think it should be?
I think scientists tend to skew more liberal, at least in the academic setting, just because we do have to ask a lot of questions and be open, and we also need funding, and funding seems to come from more liberal groups, and so, you know, we kind of find our people in that way. But I actually don't think that scientists themselves are especially equipped for diversity, just because I don't feel like scientists are really trained to deal with people most of the time, unless you're in the social sciences or psychology, right? I don't want to disparage on those, but we're trained to be scientists, and we're taught that academia and science is unbiased, that we just do our science and it'll all be fine, but that's not true. And especially if most of us come through academia, so we're academics at some point, and academia kind of has to be a part of your life to get through it. It's not just a job, and I think, but nobody talks about that and how to develop those relationships and maintain them. And so if you don't know how to deal with people just on a day-to-day basis, it's really hard to deal with some of the bigger problems that surface.
A problem I've encountered actually recently is especially with recruitment for faculty. So a lot of faculty in the upper echelons that make really important decisions are not diverse. They're very white, they're very hetero, they're very cis. And what ends up occurring is whenever they start screening for applications, they are trying to remain unbiased, so they don't take the person's diversity background into account at all. And that leads their decision making for individuals who are like them. And so the continuation of not recruiting diverse individuals, both sexuality-wise as well as ethnic-wise, and it is causing kind of a stagnant problem where there isn't representation, and that's could contribute to the whole problem of why we don't see a lot of ourselves in the upper echelons of professorship. And I think trying to solve that problem is really crucial, especially for academic research in general.
I just wanted to say I agree, and I think UNC has encountered that problem, but I think visibility and us speaking up and talking about our experiences openly and about who we are will actually hopefully change that.
Agreed.
I just wanted to touch on one thing. Caroline, you mentioned in your story I think an important point where, yes, scientists were supposed to be able to look at the data, understand, oh, well, this is the fact. There are LGBT people everywhere, and so we should include them in this equal ratio. But there's this hard line that is naturally drawn in a lot of scientists' mind. It's like, all right, we worry about the science, everything else is your personal life, and we don't really care. And that's why a lot of people in my professional life earlier on, they didn't know I was gay because it seemed like it didn't matter. It's like, no, we're going to talk about the science, or we'll do the science, and everything else is in the way. But I think that gets in the way of more important things, maybe.
So if you're here in the audience and you have a question that you would like to ask of the folks on the panel, just sort of wave at me a little bit. Just let me know. So throw your hand up, and I'm going to come out with the microphone to you. But I do want to impose one rule on the Q&A session, and it's a rule that I heard at a talk last week that was hosted by the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, which is the organization to which the museum belongs within the state of North Carolina government system. And they had the executive director for LGBT Center of Raleigh, and he had this great rule. I'm going to borrow it with credit to him for here, and that it's, if you wouldn't ask your grandmother this question, please refrain from asking it here on the panel. With that, raise your hand if you've got a question, and I'll bring a mic to you.
Is there any way that your queerness has made you a better scientist?
Yes, but I don't really know how exactly. I do think you have to interface with the world in a different way when you're queer, whether you're aware of that or not. You play by different rules, and you have to be aware of different things. And I think that does influence. I just think differently. I mean, everyone thinks differently, but I do think I bring something different. I do think I see things from a different angle because I'm not necessarily thinking in some of these kind of really common social norms that do end up influencing the way we look at science and scientific data.
Yeah, just to reiterate, like, I'm able to look at a problem from different perspectives than I probably would if I wasn't. Like, it sounds cliche, but it's pretty like, you can always solve even a scientific data problem from numerous different pathways, and it's allowed me to expand my thought and like look at things from many different angles.
Hey guys, thanks for being here. I actually work upstairs in the genomics lab, and I'm a PhD student, and I'm also a lesbian. So, yay! I also have a similar story to most of you, but I did want to say that as far as mentorship and things like that, we also have an LGBT center in Raleigh, in Durham, in the Triangle area. So people of any age, 10 years old, there are things going on for support. There are different churches in the community also that offer support to LGBT and questioning and allies and everybody else. I did want to mention that because not everybody is in science or in school, so it's important to know that there are community resources also. And I have been lucky enough to find an advisor that also supports me. And I went through, as I said, my story is similar to yours. But I actually wish I'd heard about that 500, what is it, 500 plus, what, 500 scientists? Okay, well, I'm going to have to look that up because I missed that memo somehow. So anyway, thanks.
I'll get you the link since we work together.
My question is, what is you being queer have to do with any of science and at all? Because I came here late, so sorry.
I would say it relates just in that people do science and queer people are people. And there are all kinds of support structures and ways that straight and cis people have just come up through those careers, but the inherently sometimes isolating nature of being LGBT, coming up in something that is fairly traditionally a straight and cis type of environment. It's not that there's an inherent link between being LGBT and being a scientist, but it's important to know and help those people through the struggles of being an LGBT scientist, if that makes sense.
So when I entered into my program, this was probably maybe within my first or my second year, I was in an office with 6 other women, also graduate students. And we often supported each other. You know, sometimes we were really stressed out. There were definitely tears. And I don't think that's just a woman thing. Like, grad school is super stressful. But we also, you know, we had fun, especially on like a Friday afternoon. And one Friday afternoon, we were all chatting, kind of end of the day, and we were laughing, and the conversation turned to romantic partners, and they all were dating men. And they were starting to share those stories about, oh, well, you know how guys do this or men do this, like, you know what it's like. And I was just kind of sitting there like, you guys are my friends, and I know that you know I'm out, but I can't even talk about my life right now. Like, I was just shut down like that, and I felt like I lost my support network, even if it was just for that half an hour. So I do think that visibility is important. I do think it does make a difference because we are people and we relate to other people. And I have to duck out early, so thank you all.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, I think one of the statistics, for those folks that like statistics, was that 40% of LGBTQ plus individuals in science are not out to their colleagues and coworkers, even if it's just because it might make things uncomfortable. And to imagine just going to work and having an aspect of yourself not be recognized and just being uncomfortable trying to do your 9 to 5, right? That's a barrier to being not only your true self, just being authentic, but to doing the best job that you can do.
Hi, so this is maybe not as happy. I'm an aerospace engineering undergraduate student. My department is very, very white. It is very, very male, and it is very, very straight, and I'm neither of those things. My experience over the last 4 to 5 years has been very, very isolating. It's been very dehumanizing, and it has made me strongly, strongly consider leaving the field entirely. I mean, what do you do when you're in a situation where you can't find that mentor, you just can't find that community, and you honestly feel like it's just not even worth continuing to try to go in that direction anymore?
So I'm actually in a department that is super white, super male, and not very diverse at all. So I completely understand. And there have been moments this past year where I thought, man, it's so tiring being the only one and having to stick up for myself all the time and advocate for myself. And I can guarantee, like, if I was not someone with as strong a constitution as I have, I probably would have cracked much, much sooner. And for me, I find support outside. And I know that it's sometimes unfortunate that you can't find support within the realm of your particular department, but I have sought help from people outside of the immunology department that I'm currently a part of. I've sought help from people outside of the actual School of Medicine that I'm a part of too. And you will find support outside of that department, I can guarantee you. And it will be a struggle. And my whole advice to you would be, if you love the subject that you do, you can find an environment that will support you and do it. And I don't want you to give up on it, because if you're talented and you love it, you should do it.
If you have a question, flag me down. If you're up on the second floor too, I'll remind you, you can ask questions as well. Madison has a microphone, so you can find her to ask your questions as well. And so this idea of representation, it keeps coming back up. And it's easy for me to find role models. Y'all indicated that it was difficult to find role models. Have you been able to find mentors and role models moving forward? I guess role models in particular. I think of mentors as someone who's by your side, you can talk with them. Role models, people who are maybe not right with you all the time, but who stand up and stand out for the similar issues or that you relate to in some way. Have you been able to find those people, the sorts of people that anyone maybe watching here in the theater or watching online at home could look up and find as resources?
Yeah, so I've been struggling with finding a role model until I got to grad school, and we have this queer perspective speaker series at UNC, where we invite faculty who talk about their experience, and faculty and people, scientists in general. And so our first speaker, he's a professor at UNC. He mentioned that there is this openly lesbian scientist whose name I've heard, Carolyn. She's very well known in chemistry and chemical biology. She's the star. And I found out that she's openly lesbian, and she has 3 kids, and I was like, oh my god, I have a actual role model now. So it has been a struggle, but I think I was like actually looking for people to look up to. Yeah, and that.
A role model that I found, she isn't gay, but she is at Duke University, and she is incredible. She's actually talked me down from Alleged numerous times, and it's Dr. Carolyn Black. She's actually really prolific in academic arenas for encouraging URMs to pursue science, and she's actually created this really interesting diversity program at Duke that has surpassed any metric that people can throw at it. So it's actually trying to be implemented other ways. And she's my role model because she's essentially what I would love to be doing, like increasing diversity and inclusion for LGBTQ individuals. She did it for underrepresented minorities with respect to ethnic backgrounds, but I would love to do that for LGBTQ individuals.
Thank you.
What would you like to see happen in the next few years of the queer community in science?
I'd like to go back to maybe some of those national meetings. There are a couple of small meetings that have had little panel discussions sort of like this. In physics, I think the last one was maybe in 2011, which is where they did that survey and then it just kind of went away. I'd love for it to actually become a topic of conversation of a lot of these sciences are realizing a little late that there is generally a diversity problem in science and engineering, and to make LGBT identities a part of that equation. Yeah.
I would love to just see the visibility increase and the comfort to come out increase. I am sure there are lots of LGBTQ members of faculty at Duke or at other schools nearby. It's just, I think for hiding for so long, or not hiding, maybe just withholding for so long, that they don't feel comfortable coming out. And I would love to create that environment. I want that environment to become like an actual thing that we can encourage other people to come out.
Yeah, and I want to see more people standing up and speaking about their experiences. People who including faculty, including everybody in STEM fields. They'll be a part of conversation about diversity and.
Let's give our panelists one more round of applause to say thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for answering questions. Thanks for being here at the museum today. And thanks to all of you for coming out to the museum and supporting not only our panelists, but for supporting the Museum of Natural Sciences in putting on an event like this. I'm ecstatic that we were able to do it. Stay tuned. I hope that we can do many more of these in the very, very near future. So thanks to all of you for coming out to the museum today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your visit here at the Museum of Natural Sciences. If you have opportunity to visit, there's a lot of cool science you can take in and even more cool people who are a part of this museum, we hope, and that you can meet. If y'all want to stick around, maybe folks can come up and just give you like a high five, say thanks too. But thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.